Hi everybody, John Bailey, gemstone artist and founder of the Faceting Academy. Welcome back to the studio and to another video on strategic facet sequencing. Today we're going to do a really simple six-fold design called the Simple Sapphire Snowflake that I created in celebration of Christmas for 2016. We're going to hop over to GemCAD and look at how this thing comes together. Sequencing strategy for the Simple Sapphire Snowflake. We're going to begin by studying the finished pavilion and look at the numbering of these facets in 1, 2, and 3, and why are we going to cut? Why do we number them this way? Why are we going to cut it in this order with this facet number 1 first? Because you could cut this design with facet 1, 2, 3, or even the girdle as your first order of business. We're going to cut facet number 1 first for two reasons. The first reason is it's cutting to our permanent culet point, and if we want to be rather precise with some color zoning or something, we want to put it in the culet, this is going to allow us to be very precise, and that culet point isn't going to be moving around up or down after we cut this facet. So first, for precision. The second reason is because this is a long, skinny facet, and if we cut it later, it's going to be really easy to overcut. Not a lot of surface area here. So as we step through the design, the initial cut is 12 facets, so it's a simple six-fold symmetry. Gives us 12 facets cut to a culet point. They're each on an offset of 4 indexes from our cardinal indexes, or 6 cardinal indexes. This gives us a nice hexagon when we put in the girdle facets. So step number 2, girdle facets, and this is where you would calibrate the size if that's what you wanted to do. So facets number 1, we can make them very precise because they're all coming to this point. We're not laying them in after the fact. We can check the culet point as we're cutting, make sure they're highly precise. We're also cutting them while we have lots of surface area on these facets, so we've got plenty of drag on the lap, and it's going to prevent us from easily overcutting those long, skinny facets. Now we've put in our girdles, we've calibrated the stone. The next facet to put in is this break facet along the girdle, and we're putting that in next because it allows us to make a nice straight girdle line and to make a nice meet with facet number 1 and our girdle. So we got a very precise depth on this number 2 facet. The floating facet number 3 comes in next, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 of those. And we put it in size by eye in order to make facet number 1 a parallel line with the ridge between both of the 1s and the edge of 3. If you cut below the angle, it's going to be a rhombus. You're going to angle this thing in here. If you cut above the angle, it's going to be a rhombus. It's going to taper the other direction. So cut it until it makes a parallel line, 1, 2, 3 parallel lines right across here. And that's going to help make sure that this facet is cut to the depth that it should be. This is also going to be the width of facet number 2. This view is going to be very similar to the total width of these facets number 1. And that's the pavilion. It's pretty easy, it's pretty straightforward. There's just this nice sequencing strategy in here. Cut number 1 first because you want to retain all the surface area that you can, to maintain all the drag you can, and keep very precise lines. That way, when you're finished, you'll have a really precise snowflake and not one with crooked lines. Snowflakes don't grow with crooked lines. Here we are, having finished the pavilion of our simple sapphire snowflake. We've transferred the stone, and we're now ready to cut the crown. Remember that whenever we're cutting crown breaks, we're defining the width of our girdle. So always pay attention to that, and remember, girdle width is one of the things we're establishing for sure when we cut crown breaks. There's 6 facets on the cardinal indexes, and there's our nice appropriate proportional girdle. The second row, row B, is 12 facets, again on the offsets of 4, and there they are, meeting facet A and the girdle to a nice point. You'll notice when we get a couple of facet rows above this, that one of the reasons for sequencing B here, partly because it works up from the girdle, but also it's going to be another row that's just like this pavilion row down here that's nice and skinny. It's going to be another row that's going to be skinny like that when we get to facet row D. We're going to cut B's down so they're going to be really skinny. So that's another reason, in addition to working up from the girdle, but it's another reason we want to cut B next in our sequencing strategy. Always, when a facet's going to be really tiny, cut it earlier in the sequencing if possible, in order to preserve as much surface area as possible. And this is true of the next row, C's. These guys are going to be reduced to be really small when we throw in the next facet row here. So we want as much surface area as possible. It helps keep us from over-cutting. And you'll see this when we throw in facet row D right here. 6 facets. Now look how tiny C has become. If we cut D first, C would be really easy to overcut. So we're cutting it before the D, and that way when we bring D in, C's already been done. And we have much less of a tendency to blow through this A-B meat right here. So bring D in the depth to make B a nice parallel line here, nice and square and parallel. If you undercut this, it's going to be crooked in one direction. If you overcut it, it's going to be crooked in the other direction. So just make it nice and straight and eyeball it. There's not a definite meet point here. Just do it by eye. Finally, we drop in the table. We're going to meet the points of the C's, and that is your simple Sapphire snowflake. Quick and easy design, easy to do. The pavilion facets make a nice snowflake design underneath. It looks like this. I hope you enjoy it. Merry Christmas, Merry belated Christmas 2016. And I hope you cut this and enjoy it while it's still wintertime, and maybe you'll produce some of these as Christmas presents. You have a whole year now to produce some for Christmas presents 2017. Merry Christmas to everybody. Happy meets, and hope to see you at Tucson.